My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Experts. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. On tonight's episode, we're going to talk about terrorism. It's a term that you keep hearing in the media and by politicians, but we're going to define that for you and then compare and contrast that with the global war on terror. Lastly, I'm going to give you my 4-stage strategic war plan so that you may understand what it would really take to eliminate this world of terrorism on a global scale. So let's start with the definition of terrorism. Terrorism is not a group, it's not a movement. Terrorism is a tactic. Terrorism is a tactic where fear and intimidation is used to change the political ideology of a culture. It's as old as man is because it was really the first effective weapon that could be used long before knives or guns or any other type of weapon. Terrorism was used to intimidate groups of people into following what another group wanted. Now that I've given you the definition of terrorism, it's important for you to understand how you can take that newfound education of what that tactic really is and contrast it with the global war on terror. Now, the global war on terror is a phrase that you hear all the time in the media, and it's used quite often by politicians. But I'm not really sure if either one of them know exactly what the global war on terror actually is, because you hear terms like radical Muslims or radicalization. You hear all kinds of talk about Syria and the specific war that's going on in Syria. You hear about groups. When describing the global war on terror, you hear of groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Khorasan, Daesh, the Taliban, even Iran. These are all different things that you hear about groups that sponsor terrorism. But as you can see in the definition that I just gave you, terrorism is a tactic. It's not a group, and it's not a specific sect of people. So let's look at the reality of what the global war on terror really is. The global war on terror is a war against freedom, and it's against all free people and all nations that are free anywhere on this globe. Now, who are the specific players in this global war on terror, and who are the ones that are using terrorism so frequently throughout the world? I don't think it's any surprise for me to tell you that it is a cancer that exists inside of Islam. But let's look at the reality of this cancer. 1,400 years ago, Muhammad was alive, and he was, if you don't know this, a political, a religious, and a military leader. As he pushed Islam throughout the Middle East, what you saw was war being waged, heads being rolled, and the same terroristic tactics that are being used today. That was how wars were fought back then. And a lot of those tactics are written in to the books of Islam and to the traditions in which fundamentalists actually follow. Now, before I get backlash for saying this about the fundamentals of Islam, it's important for you to note that a couple of generations after Muhammad died, there was a split in Islam. That's where you get the Sunni and Shia civil war that's constantly being waged in the Middle East. That's a whole nother story, and we'll talk about that on another episode. But it's important for you to know that this split happened, because when it happened, what it caused was a breakdown in the power hold and the power movement of Islam in the Middle East. As that power broke down, Muslims were forced to progress so that they could coexist with other countries, with other cultures, and with other peoples. As the years passed and this coexistence pushed forward, Muslims became more and more peaceful, except in the regions where fundamentalists continued to thrive. Now, a lot of the times it was in small villages, and eventually, as we saw in Iran, it was actually a state government that took over. Saudi Arabia is very similar. The Taliban is very similar. These are groups that practice fundamental Islam as it was practiced by Muhammad. So you see what the press and what politicians term as radical Islam is actually fundamental Islam. And what we term as peaceful Islam is actually progressive Islam. Now that's important for you to realize, because as you see behind me, if I pan around, you see all these beautiful buildings. This is what you get when you're free to create and you're free of restraints. What you get when fundamental Islam is in place is complete domination, and all this would be owned by this ideology. And it would not give you the freedom to build a building in the design that you want. There's nothing that you can do under such an ideology that's going to give you freedom to create. Now, again, I'm going to get backlash for this, but it's important for you, if you think I'm wrong, to go out and study the history of Islam yourself. Look at the very beginnings of Islam. And for those of you that want to argue that Christians are going around blowing up abortion clinics, that those are fundamental Christians that, do mass shootings, let me just tell you, I challenge you, go and read the New Testament in the Bible. Look at the teachings that Jesus presented as he was alive for his short life. What you'll see is that the fundamental teachings of Christianity are peace, love, and faith. What you get in the fundamental teachings of Islam, when Muhammad was alive, was dominance and conquering. The rest of the religious aspects of it came after the conquering and the domination occurred. So I challenge you, go look that up. I don't have to say anything else, and I stand by that because it's in the written words of both religions. And in fact, there's very few other religions in this world besides fundamental Islam that are actually on a global quest to push their ideology around the world and eliminate free places and free countries and free peoples. So how do we stop this global movement of fundamental Islam? I've come up with a 4-stage strategic war plan that is very simple in nature. Now, it's not something that you would hear in mainstream media or by politicians because it is effective thinking. It's realistic thinking, and you typically don't hear that in politics, and you rarely hear that on TV. This strategic war plan is not the end-all be-all of strategic war plans, but it is strategic in nature. It does name the enemy. It talks about how we can effectively push back and conquer the ground movement in the Middle East of fundamental Islam. And it talks about how we can stop the online recruitment. Those are all things that are very important for us to realize that it's going to take in order to stop the global movement of fundamental Islam. So let's start with stage 1. Stage 1, the world, the free world, has to come together and create a global coalition to defeat the forward movement of fundamental Islam. Now, there's been a lot of different coalitions over the years, including climate change coalitions, just different coalitions on hunger and those types of things. But those coalitions do not have teeth. We need a global coalition of free countries that decide that they have to stop this forward movement of fundamental Islam. This global coalition must be led by the United States. Now, why is that important? The United States is one of, if not the only country that has never been conquered. We have a free citizenry, a free middle class. We pay taxes to support our country, and we volunteer to support freedom by serving in the military. Our military fighting force is so strong because of that freedom and that understanding of service that flows through the blood veins of America. So it's imperative that the United States takes the lead in this global coalition. That's stage 1. Stage 2. This global coalition must come together and agree on a plan that incorporates a forward ground movement in the Middle East and in North Africa. These are the areas where fundamental Islam is actually pushing forward on the ground. Now, as that forward push happens and land grabs occur, the ability for these fundamentalists to recruit around the world increases as well. Now think about it. As they grab land and as they conquer villages and towns and cities, that caliphate, that Islamic State, grows as well, and so does the money base that fundamental Islam has. So it's important for you to realize we can call it whatever we want: ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Khorasan, the Taliban, Daesh. It doesn't matter. It's fundamental Islam. And it doesn't matter even if it's Sunni or Shia. Iran and the government that is in place there is a fundamentalistic thinking government. It's important for us to realize that, because ultimately we're going to have to face that circumstance as well and backpedal now that they are attempting to get nuclear weapons, and many of the world leaders have given them the green light. So this ground operation in the Middle East must be strong enough and big enough where we go in and we literally conquer this enemy on the ground and the land grabs that they have. Now, it's imperative that the Muslim community in these areas push those people out. Otherwise, they may suffer the consequences by having innocent lives lost. It is imperative, I'll say it again, imperative for these Islamic countries to go along with this plan. We cannot stop this forward movement without their cooperation. And if they don't cooperate, that means that they are supporting, knowingly or unknowingly, this fundamentalist enemy. Stage 3 is an agreement with this coalition of how they're going to go home and defeat this fundamental Islamic movement in their own countries. Now, I think it's imperative that all of these countries come together and agree upon a plan so that they can go back and operate equally in their own countries. The first thing is the online movement of fundamental Islam and its recruiting and its the spreading of its propaganda. Each country must agree on a plan on how they're going to stop this, and then go back to their respective countries and target and defeat that movement online. Secondly, all countries must reevaluate their borders and their immigration policies, not because we want to keep good people out, but because we have to police where these individuals are moving. Because as we take a ground offensive, which was in stage 2, to the Middle East and North Africa, those individuals will flee, those warriors of the caliphate. They'll flee and they will eventually move, which they're going to do anyway, into these other countries. So it's really important that we look at how we police and watch people as they come over the border and into these countries. Now, lastly, the coalition has to come together in stage 3 and put the pressure on Islam. The mosques that are in each one of these countries must step forward and stop playing the victim card. It's important that they be a part of the solution. Nobody wants to go back to their own countries and hammer the Muslim community. What they want to do is invite these individuals to come out and be a part of the solution. However, if they do not end up being a part of the solution, the coalition governments are going to have to put the weight down on the Islamic community. If there's anyone or any sign of recruiting coming out of a mosque, it should be shut down. If there's any attack, those individuals that attacked should be investigated, their lives should be investigated, and the mosque in which they came from should be investigated. Families should be held accountable. Imams should be held accountable. And neighbors that worship with these individuals should be held accountable. If we don't do that, then it's going to be a free reign covertly through the bloodstream of Islam in any country where Islam exists. Stage 4. Stage 4 is the domestic plan here at home in the United States. Now, very quickly, there's been a lot of talk about building a wall on the border. I agree with that. I do believe that there should be a wall on the southern border, but I think that we need to start looking at the northern border as well. Not that we're going to war with Canada or that I don't trust Canadians, but there are big gaps in that border where people can come over on that side as well, whether it be the drug movement or terrorists or any other type of illegal that comes into this country without permission. Now, one thing along with this wall, I think there's bases all along inside the United States. Most of those bases were not chosen for any strategic reason. They were chosen to be put in certain areas because of a powerful politician. So I think we need to rethink that plan. In places where the border is the most dangerous or where it's the least secure, I think we should start putting military bases in and around those areas so that there can be a constant roving patrol of military personnel, of planes, of helicopters, which you hear flying over me right now. You would have a constant set of eyes in those areas. And I think it's very, very wise for us to go down and at least look at the potential of putting these military bases on the border. It'll also bring a financial gain to whatever community that they're in. The government can lease the land from landowners, and it's a win-win for everybody inside the United States. Now, along with this border security initiative, I think we should also start looking at the way that we allow the right people into the United States quicker, and I think that we should start looking at getting the people that don't need to be in here out. Most people don't know that this is the law. When you come in this country once illegally and you're caught, that's a misdemeanor. But if you come back in the country again, you're now a felon. Remember that, because all these individuals that have come back and forth over the border and have been caught and deported, they're felons. But they're treated like it's nothing, like they got a speeding ticket. We need to start taking these felonies seriously. Now, I do know that people that work in the restaurant industry or in construction, they use day laborers all the time in the fields in California, and a lot of those people are illegally in this country. They have come across the border, and I really think that those people and their history should be taken into account. It should be worked out to where you get a labor visa, you get something that allows you to come over and work and then go back. But those are policies that politicians are going to have to work out, and that's where the breakdown in all this is going to come from, and that's why I'm giving you this understanding in stage 4 of what needs to be done. Now, along with Border Patrol, with fixing the immigration system, we also, like the other countries, need to look online at exactly what needs to be done in order to stop the online movement and recruitment and propaganda machine of fundamental Islam. But I've been sickened to death watching what's going on TV with Islamic community here inside the United States playing the victim card. You're not victims. You have the opportunity, because you live in a free country, to step up to the plate and push anyone that is trying to recruit or fundamentalize somebody in your mosque or in your neighborhood, to push them out for authorities to see and investigate. Once again, just like in the Boston bombings, the attacks in San Bernardino were committed by people that were known, and there were whispers in the community that they were being fundamentalized. Folks, I can't say this enough. If Islam is not willing to step up to the plate, we must put the pressure on them, and we must hold them accountable. This is an invitation to Islam inside the United States to take part in the solution, to stand up and realize that you live in a free country. If you don't do that, you're now proving all the people that are very suspicious of you correct. And I really, really hope that you listen to this, and instead of taking offense, which victims do, I hope that you listen to this and that you realize that you are the biggest part of this entire plan when it comes to solving the forward movement of fundamental Islam. That's stage number 4. Now that's my 4-stage strategic war plan. It's, like I said before, it's not the end-all be-all of strategic war plans, but it will give you some education and understanding as to how broad the scope is of this war and how little politicians are actually doing to stop it. It should also help you understand how the media skirts around this issue with political correctness or special interest, and they just refuse to admit we have a problem. Now, coming up next, we're going to step into the truth zone. That's the end of every episode that we have here on The Experts. I hope to impart some wisdom or just spark some interest in your mind so that you go out and continue this dialogue. I hope you'll join me for the last part of this show as we step into the truth zone, and I'll see you next time on The Experts. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. God bless. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Experts. I'd like to leave you with this. The media, politicians, and activists, they love to spin stuff. You should not allow your opinions to solely be formed by information that you gain from any of these three. It's really up to us folks to go out and educate ourselves so that we can understand the truth of what's going on. Many of these issues that we see in the media or that politicians talk about or that activists are so adamant about pressing into society are created or magnified crises. The reality with all of these things is that we have the answer in our own dialogue. It doesn't matter if it's the global war on terror or if it's the crisis between law enforcement and minorities. The reality is there's a solution to all these things, but we have to have dialogue. Yelling and getting angry at each other does nothing. In fact, when you sit around and collect your opinions from the words of others, you will never get the truth. Truth comes from seeking, and that's what we need to do. We need to seek answers, and we need to accept the truth of how we deal with the problems that we have in this world today. Thank you and God bless you. I'll see you next time on The Experts. I'm Jonathan Gilliam.